Good morning and welcome to the farm. I'm Katja Williams, the rural mum, and today I'm joined for our series, You've Married the Farmer, Now What? With Eleanor Cook. So Eleanor, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background and how you came to marry your farmer.
So I was brought up on a dairy farm in the Southern Highlands. My family moved to Central West New South Wales while I was doing my nursing training, and I moved out to nurse at Orange, and I met my husband, who is a first generation farmer, and romance blossomed and we got married and here we are. Yep, so our property runs sheep and cattle.
Excellent. And how did you meet Sam?
Sam bought his property and moved to the district, and we all socialised as young people with the rugby club, and he was there one night and I thought he looked pretty interesting, and he was a new arrival and he didn't have a Christmas tree, so I took him a Christmas tree, and we moved on from there. So we got together after we were together about 4 years, and then we got married, and a few years later we had our first child, and we've got 3 children who are all grown now. We've got 2 girls who are off the farm doing their own thing, and our son Sam has been back on the property for 5 years now. He had 5 years away in central New South Wales and northern Queensland and the Northern Territory, so just gave him time to see where he wanted his life to go, and now he's back doing a lot of the hard yakka.
Good. So when you first moved to the farm, were there any daily lessons or notes that you first thought, oh, I hadn't thought that I'd need to know this?
So for me, coming from a farming background, I had a fairly good idea of what was entailed. My parents had moved on, they were running a beef property. I was fairly naive about how to manage sheep, so that was a bit of a learning curve. I can remember standing in the yards with my husband yelling at me to open a gate, and when you don't know how sheep run through a set of yards and you look around a set of sheep yards and he's yelling at you, open the gate, of which there's, 5 or 10 of them, that was probably, that was probably one of my learning things, just how to handle and manage sheep as a thing. Probably for me, as I said, the hands-on side of it I was ready and willing to adjust to. For me, it was actually sorting out our domestic situation, because I was working on and off the farm, he was working on the farm, so it was actually how the domestic duties were going to be broken down was sort of one of the big things in our early marriage.
Yeah. On a weekly basis, what did you find you were doing on a daily basis?
Oh, pretty much, because of my husband's situation, he had a car accident in his 20s, and he's got mobility issues, so we always had a workman for the first quite a few years of our life. So pretty much I consider myself a bit of the farm rouseabout, so I just did whatever. So it'd be to and from town to pick up things that we needed. Certainly, in those early days on the weekends when we didn't have a workman, it was out checking lambing ewes, or if we're getting stock in, we're going to shear, just helping muster and shed sheep, and so Sam always runs the book, so I still, probably that role has just morphed over the years, but that's still really what I do. I'm just I pick up and do whatever needs to be done.
Yep. What was the biggest lesson you learned?
Biggest lesson I learnt, probably to clarify your roles. So after a few years, we came to the understanding that inside the garden fence was my domain, and we would discuss, but I had ultimate decision, or I made the ultimate decision. Things outside the garden fence was Sam's domain, and after discussion, he would then make the ultimate decision. And now that we've got our son home, it's the 3 of us make those outside decisions. And also Sam, because he's been home for 5 years, young Sam, he's now moving to take all the stock management decisions on his own, so starting to move on to him having that responsibility. When it comes to buying and selling stock, it's still a real joint decision, and ultimately we usually come to a decision, and then Sam goes ahead and does it.
What piece of advice were you given when you first moved to the farm, or over the years, that you still refer back to, that's sort of that gold nugget that sits at the forefront of your brain?
My father, who is a fourth or fifth generation farmer, he told me when I got married, if you don't want to do it, don't learn how to do it. So that has come back. That's been a pearl. I dragged my feet about the shearing shed. I now can probably do all the jobs, but yeah, over the years I wasn't enthusiastic. We always had, you know, a team come in and rousies, but yeah, so the shearing shed now, if needed, I fill in. But the other one that I really probably dragged my feet about was learning how to drive the tractor. And in hindsight, probably with the stress involved when I have had to do it, it would have been easier just to have learnt to be a reasonably proficient tractor driver. Because we run a beef and sheep business, the tractors, you know, we're not doing hours and hours on farm, you know, ploughing and stuff, but you know, when push comes to shove, if I'm the only one there, and as I said, my husband's got a mobility issue, yeah, I'm the one that has to get telling me what to do to unload something off something or put something on something. Yeah, and that's very stressful. So
particularly when you haven't done it before.
Yes, and when you're not, and because of our situation, it's like anything. If you're doing it every day or every week, you come. But I don't know that I'd ever become fully proficient because I'm not needed to do it that regularly, and then when I am needed to do it, over the years we've upgraded the tractor, so you step into the tractor and it's a whole new world. There's all sorts of lessons that you learn, but for me, the 5 lessons I think over the years, I've been in this role for a long time now, work as a team. It's probably, you know, build that team, even if it's just your husband and you, or you know, and then when the children come along, integrate them in, you know, that it's a team. Make plans but be flexible, because farming, well, droughts and rain and, you know, flexibility is a very useful tool to have.
Something always comes up.
Always factor in a buffer in anything you do, so be that a job, because inevitably you've start a job and things happen and it takes longer, so just being mindful not to fill your day up, because if you get to the end of the day and you haven't finished your jobs, you feel a bit defeated, where if you've finished and can get something extra done, you feel better about it. You know, your fodder, factor in a buffer for fodder for drought, so that, you know, we've been through in our years of marriage, drought's been a very dominant part of our farming career. And, you know, money, you know, have a bit of money there. There's going to be hard times in farming, so, you know, just try and have, none of us can have mega bucks, but, you know, if there's just a little buffer.
Buffer for cash flow.
Buffer for cash flow. And probably, you know, I've worked on farm, off farm, all my married life, and so that off farm money has always sat there for, you know, if the washing machine blows up, there's always something. I can just go and buy myself a new washing machine and make life easy. Good times are always followed by bad times, so you just just be comfortable with that rotation. And for me, just always keep farm safety in mind. You know, I've been around long enough to have seen tragedies, and I have to say my family probably very affectionately labelled me the farm safety Nazi, but I don't regret being that way.
Yeah. Were there a few things that you've implemented in particular on the farm over the years around that farm safety? The things would probably think about the 4-wheel bike. The kids, they would go on it with us, but they were quite old before I let them ride it on their own. You know, we're quite lucky, the place isn't not completely flat, but you know, it's just that kids don't have that capacity to risk assess. And so the 4-wheel bike, much to my absolute son's disgust, I wouldn't let him near a chainsaw until he'd done a chainsaw course. And since he's got home, he's had one significant near miss, and he now, at an older person, now respects why I had that attitude. We did low stock handling course with our kids when they were reasonably young, because they were always working and helping in the yard. So they're probably the 3 things that really stick out to me. Yeah. Don't turn your back on an animal. It doesn't matter how friendly they are, how long you've been around it. Just don't turn your back. Beautiful. Having the kids on the farm, what would you say when they were younger would have been your go-to, what you would now refer to as tips and tricks for having the three on the farm with you?
Yeah, I found that one a really difficult one. I have to say, when they were under school age, I pulled back from doing a lot of the hands-on stuff. It was just too hard to juggle myself, the kids, and everything else. So we, on the weekends and stuff, they were there, but obviously Sam would be with them, and I'd be doing something or whatever. And then as they got older, we probably the thing was just to set very clear limits and get them involved. So because if they're doing something, they're less likely to be wandering off getting into mischief,
Yes.
And it also, being from a farming family, the kids, they just rolled up their sleeves, and they had to. We got to a point with droughts where we had to let our workmen go. By then the kids were all in late primary, early high school, and they just became part of the team. So no specific, but just being mindful that when you've got the kids, your main role is to be their mum, which involves just keeping them safe, and if other things didn't happen,
So that encompasses the change in adaptation as they grew. Were there still limitations or things that you tried to implement with them once they were of school age, particularly going into the high school years and they took on a little bit more, on the weekends or in the afternoons? Was there any roles in particular that they had that you then incorporated just safety nuts into?
Yeah, I suppose the kids all, ended out with jobs that they did. There were animals to feed and those sort of things. So you when you started to move over, you just gave them jobs that were within their capacity.
Yeah.
You didn't put them into roles that was beyond their capacity, and you supervise them. I can know, when Sam was out with the four-wheel bike and the kids started to use the four-wheel bike, then he was out there with them, and just guiding and reminding, and then if he'd in a situation and had got a bit ahead of them, fortunately we never had any big accident. It was just to reflect on that and what could have happened. So teaching them to try and grow that sort of bigger vision, which comes with stage. Again, the tractor work, everything went it was a very informal training program, but there was a training. They just weren't sent out to do something. They were guided and monitored, and
That's good.
So letting them out with a little leash rather than throwing them the whole leash and letting them run.
And see what they come back with.
Yeah.
How did that reflection as part of your team structure? You said teamwork was very important to you and the family. So when you were doing the reflection of, okay, so this happened today in the yards, we're not going to do that next time. How did that conversation look?
Usually, every now and then, it was dangerous at the time. So at the time, there was the reaction, and then it was back into the house, later on, and then just revisiting it and taking that reaction because you were worried about their safety and you were worried about them, and bringing them in and trying to get them to talk about how it happened and why it happened, and just to, again, trying to encourage them to use it as a learning experience. And depending on the situation and the child, sometimes they get a bit bristly. But that's just, as your kids grow, you learn their different natures and you sort of learn ways to address things. So probably my biggest, throughout all my life, while ever you're angry about something, don't have the discussion. Wait until you'll feel calm about it. So it might be 24 hours later before you actually go back and revisit it, because when things are said in anger, it's very hard to retract them, where if you can say things when you're calm, the message is heard much better.
Yes.
Didn't do it all the time.
No. And then we circle back again.
And then you apologise if you've really been whoopee.
So you spoke a little bit about balancing the farm life with the family life. When the kids were younger, you pulled back a little bit. and then yourself and the kids got more involved as you progressed again. Was there any other indications as to whether it was their age or their maturity as to why you would readapt or head back into certain jobs and roles, or did you find that sometimes it was a necessity for you and the kids to get involved?
Yeah. I think I answered this question, and I said, for me, my priority was my children. So work, off-farm work, on-farm work, and other extracurricular things, they had to step back at times. I had to be conscious. I couldn't keep all the balls in the air, so I had to, back off on my work, or no, I can't do that. So that was sort of the way of coping when they were littler.
Yep.
And then as they grew, it was just them also realising, or part of them getting to understand that sometimes their needs had to take second priority. So as you said, if we had a heifer that was calving, and that was the priority at the time, they then had to learn to sit in the car or wait patiently, and that was when they were still quite little, or sit in the shed and don't make a big noise because it's hard enough doing the job on its own. And then as they got older, that just evolved, and they were given responsibilities and things to do. Clearly quite early on, neither of my girls actually wanted to be hands-on full-time farmers. But my young son, really from quite a young age, it was probably clear that he wanted to, but I didn't want to put him under the pressure that he had to be a farmer. So a lot of the times, young Sam took on a lot of that role, and the girls then just came in and helped as it was needed. But that was one of the reasons, when young Sam got to the end of high school, we'd had a huge long drought, and we weren't in a position to take him. We weren't comfortable that we could bring him back into the business and make it a going concern. So he went off to the territory and places to see whether he wanted to move into that corporate side of things. Ultimately we had a few good seasons, and he learnt that he wanted to be a farmer, not a people manager. Yep. And he came home. Yeah.
That's good. So you've mentioned a few times that drought did make up a fair part of the marriage and being on the farm. So what would you say were some of the most important lessons that you learnt during the drought, and how were you able to manage the cattle and the sheep on the place moving forward?
Yep. So very early in our marriage, my husband did grazing for profit source, so sell grazing. So we very early learnt that monitoring your rain and your fodder production then gave you a clear guide to what you did with your stock. So probably for droughts it was, monitor your rain, your fodder growth, and reduce stock numbers early rather than waiting them over the time. And it's not always easy to do, but I don't think we've ever lived to regret. Bearing that in mind, we're in a position that we can come back, so we focus on keeping our core stock of breeding, and we might spend a little bit more money on them in the end to keep them, because then we've got a base to grow back up from. So that's probably around, in droughts, around stock management. The other thing is just to be supportive of each other, really, and when, fortunately, when one of us is down, not too often were we both down together or feeling a bit overwhelmed. So it's just, and to help with that, always try and have a little bit of fun from time to time. A little bit of fun doesn't need to cost you money. You can have friends over and everybody can bring a plate. And one of the things, I've got a middle girl who loves to stargaze, and you can go out on a clear night and look at the sky, and the sky always looks beautiful, even if you're standing on dirt. Yeah. So, and there's lots of other things you can give, but it is just that real balance to, being mindful.
How did you go with water management during the drought?
Because we had, as I said, we had drought pretty much on and off through the whole of our marriage. Big stint at the end, but very early on, because we'd done the Grazing for Profit course, they talked about reticulated water being good for stock just the production, you know. So we put in a trough system.
Yep.
Over the years it took a while because it's not an inexpensive thing, but again, we've always had, and we're fortunate, we run onto the bottom on the permanent water so we can pump, so we've always got a water supply. So we've although there's always issues, but yeah, we haven't run out, we're not in a position where we run out of water.
Always keep a backup pump and parts.
Yes, yeah, because if you don't have a pump then you do run out of water, and keep an eye on your tanks, because just unbeknownst to you there's a break in the pipe and you've lost your whole tank load, and so monitoring, that's probably a reticulated system, and just always monitoring through that droughts.
Your methods during the drought, were they to make little decisions more often, or did you set time limits on when you would, sell the next lot, or?
Theoretically, time limits, I think probably we always had some form planning. What goes next? When does that happen? And it's like everything, it's not an actually precise science, so sometimes we didn't do it and we should have, and other times we did it and we shouldn't have, so it's that's why you never get bored farming.
Hindsight is amazing. So between those drought periods, did you have any higher than usual rain periods or flooding that caused other issues on the farm?
You always have, Mother Nature's, she can be very kind and she can be very cruel. I can remember at one stage we had a paddock of buckwheat just about ready to harvest, and we got a hailstorm and it just annihilated the whole thing. When we went to the top of the hill and looked across it, it looked all right, and then when we got to it, it was flattened and there was absolutely nothing you could do about it. Again, we're up on undulating country, so we don't have a lot of issues with flooding and stuff, but we have just been through 2 really wet seasons, and the thing, a very rare occurrence, we had one in 2016, I think we had one when the children were little in about the late 1990s, and the thing that I've learned from that is stock actually struggle harder in wet weather, so really in that wet conditions you've got to monitor your animal welfare, animal husbandry stuff, and try and get on top of stuff. Certainly, we've got sheep, so worms raise their ugly head, with grey abandoned, especially barber's pole. They can look all right one day and next day they're looking pretty awful. The other thing probably with me, having come from a dairy farm and come to wet seasons, is have good wet weather gear, because it's much easier to go out and do. We're in a colder climate, not much of New South Wales suffers like we do, but a bit. But when it's wet, if you've got good wet weather gear, it just makes trudging out there and doing slodging through the mud an easier task.
And check.
I just, I think if you're fortunate enough, like I am, to be able to, grow up and live off the land, is it just, the variation, you never get bored. There's a lot of satisfaction in what you do. You're doing something that provides for the wider community, and definitely within the family unit, it certainly supports your kids have a really good, strong work ethic, and that's something I think in Australia that we used to pride ourselves on and might be waning a little bit. So if you've got your country kids, you can be pretty confident that they're a bit sought after in the workplace these days, because most of them know how to roll up their sleeves and get on with a bit of work when it needs to be done.
Thank you, Eleanor, for coming on today and sharing your story, your tips and your tricks, and what you've learnt over the years on the farm. It's always good to see someone come from, that dairy background or a different background into, something that is quite different, and how you've adapted over that.
I'm much better with sheep these days.
Much better with sheep, that's good. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.